Today, I'm going to explain the film Bird Box, an American horror science fiction film. There will be spoilers ahead. Keep an eye out and be cautious. The film begins with a woman named Mallory Hayes gathering her children and informing them that they are embarking on a journey. Mallory explains to the two children, whom she refers to as girl and boy, that they will be rowing through a river for several days. The plan is to reach a secluded house in the forest where they can meet other friends. But there is one caveat. They will be wearing blindfolds throughout the trip, and if the children take them off, even by accident, they will be in trouble. Following the instructions, Mallory leads them outside while blindfolded. She also brings her pet birds with her. They soon arrive at the bank of a river where a boat awaits them. Mallory throws it into the river, jumps in with the kids, and the journey begins. Following that, the film flashes back in time 5 years. Mallory is a budding artist who is 8 months pregnant. She recently divorced and is still dealing with the effects of the breakup. Her sister, Jessica, arrives one day while she is painting with some news. She mentions that everyone was stocking up on groceries while she was at the department store because the thing was approaching them. Mallory, who has been cut off from the outside world since her divorce, is unaware of it. So she turns on the television. To her surprise, every news outlet is covering a mysterious outbreak that has ravaged parts of Eastern Europe. The virus's symptoms are extremely bizarre. Anyone infected will feel compelled to commit the unthinkable. The virus appears to take over their brains and transform them into monsters. Mallory, on the other hand, dismisses it, believing that the outbreak is far from the United States. Jessica eventually takes her to the doctor. Dr. Laffin, the family physician, performs some tests on Mallory and asks if she is ready to be a parent. Mallory hesitates for a moment before saying yes. On her way back, she notices something strange. A woman is repeatedly slamming her head against the glass pane. This alerts Mallory to the fact that the European outbreak has arrived in the United States. So she rushes outside and informs Jessica that they must return home immediately. Pandemonium has already set in by the time they prepare to leave. Hundreds of people have become infected and are attempting suicide in various ways. Cars are colliding, people are falling, and other unexpected events are occurring. Jessica drives her car through the chaos, and it appears that they will make it home. But then her eyes stop moving and she stares into something only she can see. Mallory makes every effort to bring Jessica back to consciousness, but to no avail. The car is involved in a fatal accident the next second. The sisters manage to escape unscathed, but Jessica, who is still in shock, commits the unthinkable. Mallory doesn't even have time to mourn because the city has devolved into a war zone by this point. People are dying all over the place. Mallory tries to follow some people to safety, but she trips and falls. Seeing her struggle, a woman leaves her home and attempts to assist Mallory, despite her husband's protests. Unfortunately, her decision proves fatal as the evil entity takes possession of her. The woman looks at the invisible entity for a moment before walking inside a burning car. It soon explodes, killing her instantly. Mallory is finally helped up and rushed into the house by a man named Tom after the horrific encounter. Inside the house are several people, including the owner, Greg, his friend Douglas, and Machine Gun Kelly. In the following scene, everyone congregates in the main room to discuss the supernatural entity that has been wreaking havoc around the world. Charlie, a grocery store employee, believes it is the end of the world, while others believe it is an act of God. At this point, however, everyone is aware that the entity is impenetrable and that staring at it will result in their death. Meanwhile, Tom consoles Mallory, who is still distraught over her sister's untimely death. She was living a happy life, free of problems and stress, an hour ago, but now the world around her has turned upside down. Later, the entire group gathers to board up all of the doors and windows. They want to ensure that no one looks out the window. Mallory and her children have been on the boat for 6 hours now. They sometimes cover themselves with a blanket to remove their blindfolds. Mallory tries to use her walkie-talkie to see if anyone is nearby, but all she hears is the invisible entity whispering her name. Back in time, Mallory and the other survivors began to coexist in the house. One day, a survivor named Olympia knocks on the door and begs to be let in. Douglas refuses to let her in, but the others eventually persuade him. When Olympia walks in, it is revealed that she, too, is pregnant. Greg later comes up with an idea. He decides to look through the CCTV cameras to see what's going on outside. The others are skeptical, but they make no objections. Greg soon sits in front of his computer and watches the footage. He becomes aware of something and immediately freezes. It appears that the entity has taken possession of him. After a while, the others hear a loud bang from his room and rush in to find Greg lying in his own pool of blood. This makes them realize that the entity can possess them even through the computer, so they immediately destroy it. It has been 14 hours since the family has been rowing in the river. Mallory is startled to hear a man's voice telling her it's okay to remove her blindfolds. Recognizing that the person may be infected, she instructs the children to remain low and wear their blindfolds. Soon after, the voice, which appears to be approaching, mentions that he has food. He also claims to have encountered the friendly entity. He lunges at the boat just then, but Mallory is ready. She slashes him with a machete and kills him. In the following scene, we are transported back in time to a time when the group has run out of food. Mallory, Tom, and a few others decide to go to a nearby department store where Charlie used to work because help is unlikely to arrive. They paint the car windows black and use GPS to guide them. The GPS begins to beep violently in the middle of their journey, indicating that the entity is nearby. Tom, on the other hand, manages to get them out of harm's way and into the store. The group rushes inside and stockpiles whatever they can get their hands on. Meanwhile, Mallory comes across some pet birds and decides to take them home with her. The group is almost finished scavenging when a man starts screaming from the freezer. He mentions that he's been trapped inside for days and that food is running low. Tom and the others believe his story and open the door, and the birds begin to make noise. They appear to be aware of the presence of possessed people nearby. The man inside the freezer abruptly alters his demeanor and begins acting like a demon. Tom and the others try to keep him contained, but the man appears to be far too powerful. Charlie sacrifices himself to save the others after realizing that if he comes out, everyone will die. That night, while Mallory and Douglas were talking in the kitchen, they heard a noise coming from the garage. Regrettably, Machine Gun Kelly and his girlfriend have managed to flee in their only vehicle. Back in the present, the family has been on the river for 24 hours. Mallory has become so tired that she crashes the boat into an old truck. As a result, the boy and all of their supplies fall into the river. Mallory, fortunately, saves the boy and docks the boat near the shore. She then warns the children to stay put before venturing into the woods in search of supplies. She finds an abandoned hospital with a thin rope and collects some food and clothing. The entity can be heard calling Mallory's name as she rushes outside the building. Meanwhile, at the beach, the little girl becomes concerned because her mother has been gone for an hour. So she defies Mallory's order and goes inside the jungle to look for her. Unfortunately, the entity begins to speak to her, suggesting that she remove her blindfold and gaze at the green forest. The little girl is persuaded, but Mallory arrives and whisks her away before she can act. The three then board the boat and continue their journey. In the following scene, Olympia lets a suspicious-looking man named Gary into the house. The others are furious that she made the decision without consulting anyone. Nonetheless, they examine Gary and allow him to remain. He eventually claims that there are other people outside who are not wearing blindfolds. They've figured out how to coexist with the entity, except for the old man, Douglas, who pulls out his gun and orders him to leave. He is quickly subdued, however, when Greg's mother, Cheryl, knocks him out with a vase. Douglas is then locked in the garage by the group. Olympia apologizes profusely for causing so much trouble and being such a burden, but Mallory assures her that she did nothing wrong. As the two pregnant women bond, they promise to care for their children if one of them dies. As a baby shower gift, Mallory gives Olympia a Hello Kitty toy. The little girl is holding the same toy in the present, revealing that she is Olympia's daughter. As they approach the rapids, Mallory wraps herself and the kids in a blanket, warning them that this will be the most dangerous part of the journey. She then mentions that one of them will have to take off their blindfold to navigate the path. Both of the innocent children want to volunteer, but Mallory is in a pickle. She is unwilling to give up on either of them. So after some thought, Mallory decides that no one will look. They will simply battle the rapids and let God decide their fate. Mallory and Olympia have previously gone into labor at the same time. While Tom and Cheryl are helping the women upstairs, Gary is doing something creepy downstairs. He displays his collection of monster drawings, revealing that he, too, is possessed. It turns out that his main reason for coming here is to infect the others. He is one of the entity's few messengers. To begin, he places Mallory's birds in the refrigerator to prevent them from alerting the others. Gary then begins tearing the newspapers from the window. Meanwhile, Olympia has a girl and Mallory has a boy, which makes everyone happy. Unfortunately, the joy is fleeting as Gary storms into the room and raises the window shades. Mallory quickly moves her gaze away, but Olympia is not so fortunate. She becomes possessed and decides to do the unthinkable by jumping out the window. But before she can do so, she gives her daughter to Mallory. Cheryl, the old woman, is forced to open her eyes after she dies, and she, too, dies in agony. Douglas then arrives with his gun and manages to shoot Gary in the arm. Douglas is also terminated after a brief scuffle between the two. Fortunately, before the freak can kill any more people, Tom dispatches him with his gun. It is now just him, Mallory, and the children. 5 years pass, and the four continue to live in a secluded house in the woods. Even the birds have survived. They've been away from the city's ills, and the kids have adjusted to their new surroundings. They do not, however, have any names. Tom criticizes Mallory for doing the same, but she believes it is not a priority right now. They hear some noise outside one day and go outside to find a swarm of infected people in cars looking for the uninfected. This makes the couple realize that even their own home is dangerous to live in. Mallory's walkie-talkie suddenly comes to life that night while they are sleeping. From the other side, a man named Rick begins to speak. He claims to be in a secure complex with plenty of food and supplies. However, getting there will be difficult. Rick explains that they will have to travel for several hours along the river, battling the dangerous rapids. He makes 2 points before hanging up. The river is dangerous for children, and the birds are crucial in locating the complex. The couple talks about it the next morning. Mallory is skeptical of Tom's desire to visit the compound. She refuses to believe anyone after the last incident with Gary. The infected people show up again the next day, while the couple is scavenging at a nearby house. Recognizing that they don't have enough time, Tom advises Mallory to take the children and leave while he attends to the problem. The latter is almost in tears, but she agrees for the sake of the children's safety. Mallory eventually packs her belongings and leaves with the children through the back door, while Tom grabs a gun and goes to confront the infected. He kills a few of them before being shot himself. So, in order to finish them all off, Tom removes his blindfold. When he does, he transforms into a monster and slaughters everyone one by one. Then he does something unthinkable. Meanwhile, Mallory and the kids have returned home. As seen at the beginning of the film, she begins briefing them on their journey. It's been 42 hours, and they've finally arrived at the deadly rapids. Mallory does her best to navigate the waves, but the boat capsizes and everyone falls overboard. Fortunately, she is able to grab her children and reach the shore safely. Following that, the three begin slowly walking through the woods. In its invisible form, the entity tries to trick Mallory and the children into removing their blindfolds. They, however, completely disregard him and instead follow the sound of the birds. They soon arrive at a large compound, and Mallory begins banging on the door like a maniac. Fortunately, they are let in after someone opens the door and confirms that they are not infected. Inside, they finally meet Rick, who explains that the compound was once a blind school. That's why no one was ever infected here. Dr. Laffin arrives and approaches Mallory, congratulating her on having such adorable children. She inquires about their names, and Mallory responds with Olympia and Tom after some thought. The film concludes with her opening her bird box and releasing the birds.